Welcome back to the Resupply with me, Guy Next Door.
And me, DK.
Bringing you your hopefully weekly double tap of all things Laserforce and Space Marine. So, probably right off the bat, you'll notice that the other voice in the intro is not Fan. Well, I mean, unless you're from New Zealand and then all Americans sound the same. But I'd like to welcome the new host of the Resupply, Mr. DK.
It's all about the upgrade, baby. You have cashed in for a much more attractive co-host. Nobody can blame you.
A slightly younger version of the same thing.
Emphasis on slightly.
So Than sort of passed the mantle, I guess. He's busy, being a musician and stuff, and is now too cool to hang out with me. So, yeah, it's kind of fallen on you to take up the cowl and talk shit about Laserforce with me on the internet.
Well, I got to do something. I have not been able to play much Laserforce as of late, so this will hopefully be a good experience here.
We'll get into that. We'll bring it down a bit later on. But right now, I guess probably the main reason that we started doing the podcast last year in the first place was Nationals. So what better way to start this year's? I think this is the first one for this year. Did we? I don't think we did one yet this year.
I don't think we've recorded since the end of last Nationals.
I went back and had a look through. The last one I could find, it was me and Than did a rundown of Nats, but I think that was just after it had finished. So yeah.
Yeah, essentially right after.
It's been a minute. And our twos of fans, have been hitting me up on the regular, asking when we're going to record next, and I'm looking squarely at you, Wolfman. Leave me alone. We're doing one, okay? Get off my back. So
love you, Wolfman.
What's I guess we'll start with this year's Nationals, 2019 Nationals. What are the deets, DK?
So it is headed back to Detroit, more or less where US Nats was rebooted back in 2009. This will be their third time hosting, which I guess is kind of a record for US sites in terms of Nationals.
Because the only other... Oh, no, there's been a few over there, right?
2009,
modern age.
2013, and then this year.
Right.
Plus a variety of East Coast random draws, variety of different tournaments like that.
Yeah. Okay, so by now I would expect that there's quite a large contingent of people in the States that have played in the Detroit arena. Is that fair to kind of assume?
Quite a few, yeah. I don't know if all the Loveland guys have played there or not. I can't remember which random draws they've gone to and which they haven't, because they never schedule those things when I can actually attend. Bunch of jerks.
It's stupid being an adult.
Yeah.
So, when is Nationals this year?
So it's going to run from July 22nd through July 26th. So right at the height of the summer season over here in the States, and not your backwards winter down underland.
Perfect time of year to have a barbecue in a park.
Yes, actually it will be fairly late in the evening, so maybe we will have it at a park this year.
Okay, so July this year, Detroit Nationals. I guess we were sort of discussing what to talk about with this particular podcast, and I think you suggested that maybe we talk about some of the teams that have confirmed that they're going and some of them that are kind of rumored. So do you want to take us through some of the as confirmed as you can be before the tournament actually starts?
Sure. So the teams that we have rumored/confirmed, I'm pretty sure that we're looking at a minimum of 9 teams for the tournament. I can definitely confirm that there will be 2 Sacramento teams, or at least the remnants of Sacramento teams that are going, since everybody needs to get their fix now.
Yeah.
So we have 2 Detroit teams, Detroit A and B, Brisbane is sending over their team of ringers to come and take the belt, so to speak. Two Loveland teams are rumored / confirmed. We have St. George that's going to be in attendance, Syracuse, and then the two aforementioned SAC teams for a grand total of 9.
Wow.
But it looks like we have enough Mercs for a potential kind of hybrid that's coming in, variety of players, including a couple of people from your neck of the woods, as I understand.
Yeah, we've got 2 guys that have actually bought plane tickets, so they are coming. Possibly more to come. We'll see.
No, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, this is Exhibit A and getting the peer pressure up there, because there may or may not have been somebody who got peer pressured into coming last year thanks to these podcasts.
Absolutely, the FOMO was real with a lot of people. So if we can contribute to at least 1 or 2 extra people coming to nationals because of this podcast, then we've done our job properly, I guess.
That would be ideal. And if we make it to 10 teams, that would tie it for the largest Laserforce tournament of all time, basically, since we had 10 in Loveland in 2015. Other things we don't need to talk about from that tournament, but that was pretty cool, the fact that we had 10 teams.
Well, at least you didn't have to worry about how you were going to fit all the games in for that nationals.
Maybe not.
So this being the third one, obviously Sans old owners is probably the best way I can put it.
the interlopers.
But that's huge. That's going to be a massive tournament. I know that every year, we talk about how we're actually going to fit all the games in. I know that you've been involved in some of the discussions around scheduling and stuff, but do you know any of the confirmed ways that that they're going to sort of help run the tournament smoother or fit all these games in?
A good question. So people who want a little bit of insight into the organizational side, so these are all things that the adults in the room need to work at in advance, is how we're going to fit all this stuff together. The nice kind of option about having this many teams is hopefully you can get things running smoothly. You essentially run people in different blocks. So you have 2 teams that are in there playing, 2 teams that are in there reffing. When they come out, an entirely different set can go in. So essentially you kind of have 8 teams that are either on deck or playing in the arena. So the game resolution of one won't affect what's happening in the other, and you kind of just filter people in and out. So we can do that. We can do what we've been doing, is the sort of play ref sit rotation and give some of the teams some time off during the day. Because the drawback of having 10 teams, obviously, is that it's just a ton of downtime if you're not actively in the field or reffing or stuff like that. The muscles can get sore, people can get a little bored, you want to go out and do other things. So we're toying with exactly how best to accommodate the schedule in that way. The goal is to try to get 2 full rounds of play in. I think if we time everything correctly, that could work correctly. It just is going to be a little dicey when it comes to finals. So that's the other big thing, is scheduling out how much time you want for finals. Originally, I think going back to, I want to say it was actually 2010 when you came over the first time. We ended up coming up with the idea of a double elimination finals for everybody, but I think that was largely because we ran out of time to do a full third round. So that, let's just do a double elimination. That effectively adds another round of play. And for a number of years, that just sort of became the standard expectation of, okay, we're going to have round play, and then everybody will compete in the double elimination finals. But in the last couple of years, we kind of sat down and asked, well, why? Why does everybody need to be in the double elim finals? Isn't that what round play is for? And let's be real, as good as everybody is, only a few teams are really going to be competing for about those top 3 or 4 spots. So can we find a way to shorten finals? So I think what we did last year in Brisbane was a good compromise, where you had sort of the single elimination play-in for the teams that were at the bottom of the ladder, and then you have the double elimination for, say, the top 6 or some just smaller number in the field.
So the weaker strength teams sort of get to experience finals, Laserforce, but I guess as with most kind of major sports, you kind of have to earn your way into into the playoffs, I guess, right?
Yeah, because you need to find the balance between, one, making sure that it's worth everybody's entry fee. So that is definitely why we're aiming for 2 full rounds of
Yeah.
play. Because then if you're playing, 9 matches against 2 other teams, or against, every other team, that's 18 games per round. So you could get, 36 games guaranteed for your entry fee. And that is a pretty good number of games.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them, especially in Detroit, are going to probably be longer games. It's just a field that lends itself to maybe a somewhat more defensive style of play. Games run a little bit longer. There aren't as many quick eliminations. So that's the other reason why, we're a little concerned about making sure we're getting our timetable right.
Right. I suppose as well, like the idea of having teams on deck for playing the next game. It only it seemed last year that because we kind of ran it that way last year, although a lot of people would sort of disappear when they were supposed to be in the armory or whatever. But
yeah, that happens every year. But on the scale of things, I think last year ran pretty smoothly in that regard. Which I mean, again, big thanks to Tragedy, to Andrew, to Taipan, to everybody who kind of kept things moving.
Yeah, for sure. And it only really gets a little muddled when you have a change of round, right? Or when you have a change of is that right? The change of the round?
Yeah, potentially because that's when, or the change of a round or the change of a block when you have different teams who are scheduled at different times, because that's when the whole play ref set rotation can get messed up.
Yeah.
And maybe a team is reffing twice in a row, so they may not be done with the resolution of the penalties or whatever else in the previous game before they have to go in to do another one.
Right. So hopefully, I mean, I guess you can only really do what you can to plan to move the stuff quickly, but there's always there's always the drama that happens, and it's whether or not that drama takes way longer than it should, or if we can get through it quicker. But it sounds like I think based on what I've seen in the committee discussions, it's seemingly in a good place. If people have taken a lot out of what happened last year and at previous Nats, and hopefully this year will run even smoother than it has in the past.
I think it does get better on a year-to-year basis because we are able to learn from mistakes or accidentally discover things that worked better and then just incorporate them for future years.
I think also
I am kind of go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think also at this point we've got quite a consistent turnout of the same players coming back for these tournaments, and so you get more and more people that have an expectation of how the tournament is run and how Nats kind of works. So you're not dealing with a bunch of rookies that aren't sure what's going on. So that also
very true. Very true.
Yeah. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Well, we may want to have Tragedy back on at some point because I think there was some discussion in their most recent Brisbane league of trying out an experiment with reffing where they remove the kind of point penalties from when refs assess in-game infractions.
Right.
And basically hoping to encourage referees to step in to prevent infractions from happening. And I think part of the reason, or at least this is the hypothesis they're testing, why referees weren't doing that before, is because of the big penalty of losing 1,000 points, not potentially swinging the outcome of a game.
Right.
If all it's going to happen is somebody gets deactivated for 8 seconds and you stop them from chasing or you shut down their kind of shielded shots or something like that, it's not really quite as much pressure on the referee to really know that they're getting the call right versus having to, assess all that in post game.
Yeah.
And then afterward, you could just kind of debate over, okay, was this just something that we need to shut down at the time, or is this something that actually needs to be penalized with a point value?
Yeah.
So I'm curious to actually hear some input on whether or not that experiment was a success or even whether it went forward, because I don't know that for sure.
Yeah. I think as well, with our community, people don't generally cheat on purpose. Whenever there's an infraction, usually it's accidental. So
yes,
yeah, I think for the most part, those after game, verifications, they move pretty quickly because for the most part, people either didn't see it all the way or, there was no Yeah.
Well, you would hope so.
Yeah.
I don't want to set a new record for yet again being one of the key referees who has to determine whether or not a game-altering penalty happened. It seems like that happens virtually every year.
Which is a
So
shame.
either other people are not watching and I'm just catching everything, or I am just the unluckiest referee in the universe.
Yeah, I generally fall asleep. No, just kidding. It's dark in there, and it's hot. Stop having it in summer. This is bullshit.
You're too busy recording DK fails.
Exactly right. Or like talking shit to players in the game, but just loud enough, just loud enough so no one else can hear me.
That's probably my single biggest regret from refereeing the finals of last year was I didn't massively abuse my referee powers and just go in and break Taipan's wall so Rusty could break in.
Yeah, that might be game altering in itself.
Well, my argument would be they'd already punted at that point, but why take the chance?
There's such a disappointing way to end that tournament, but that's okay. So you've personally played Detroit Mazes, yes?
Yes, I went in both 2009 and 2013.
Right.
Which were pretty good successes.
Yeah.
We've won in 2009, came in
nice.
second in 2013 with our kind of taped together hybrid team. But that was a really fun tournament, really fun team. It was sadly the last time I got to play with Flint, but that was a really nice trip, and it's definitely an interesting field.
So what would you say is kind of your favorite part about that maze, or the way that it plays?
I think it's the level of team coordination that is required and the fact that base runs have to be carefully planned in that field. I think probably relative to Sacramento, I would say probably requires the least planning as far as base runs are concerned, because the targets are so far removed. They're mostly covered. They're downstairs. You can just kind of go get them at your own convenience.
Yeah.
Because of where the targets are situated in Detroit, the color targets are basically sitting under where the primary defense area for each team are. So there's a good chance that they will see you when you go to get them.
Right.
And since they have elevated positions, they can shut you down somewhat easily. So maybe it's a little bit more like Brisbane in that sense. But it also seems, just because of where the targets are positioned, like it's a long haul. It's a hike to get from where you're set up to go downstairs to get the targets. You either have to go directly through the opponent's line of defense and go all the way down the ramps to get around, or you have to go down your ramp and basically cross the entire field to go do them. So it does require, I think, a little bit of work and coordination of, okay, when are we going to get our bases?
Right. So you kind of looking to your commander to drop nukes so you can actually take the resupply on a base run, or?
That is at least one option that people have done. I think it's just kind of developed as either a habit or a particular style among some of the Detroit teams.
Yeah.
It seems like they wait for 60 seconds, have the commander have a nuke in their pocket, and then at 60 seconds, all hell breaks loose with both receps trying to go get the bases. Commanders are sort of trying to nuke over one another, and it gets very messy very quickly. That is one kind of philosophy of doing that.
Yeah.
I personally don't like leaving it to the last minute like that, but I guess if there's no other time to do it.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because that's kind of like an older style of play. Like we, back when I first started playing, that was kind of the done thing. You would wait till 60 seconds, and then you would chain 4 or 5, depending on how good your commander was. And if you've got both teams doing that, then, yeah, you're right. That last minute just becomes, like, crazy. Especially if both resupplies are, A, still in the game, and B, both trying to go get the bases, so... Weird.
Yeah, which is a real possibility, because essentially the way the Detroit Maze plays is that the resupplies are at the top of each of their respective ramps.
Yeah.
And because the ramps are long and have some kind of severe corners, it's pretty easy for medics to be aware that danger is coming, to move down part of the ramp to get around another corner, so they're not just getting pinged constantly.
Right.
So it isn't necessarily all that uncommon for resupplies to survive pretty far into the game.
Yeah. If my memory serves me correct, are these the ramps that Traj had some contentious issues with the last time they played in Detroit?
Trad has never been there.
Oh,
As
really?
far as there has
That might
never
have
been
been
a
Loveland
Brisbane
I'm
team
thinking of.
go to Detroit. I think it is the Loveland ramps that you're thinking of,
Right,
because
right.
that I know was the year that his knees were having a particularly difficult time.
Stupid
The
age.
Chula ramps were certainly no joke either.
Oh yeah, I vaguely remember those. Um, so, has there actually been a Southern Hemisphere team play Detroit?
There has not. I know, much to the consternation of Josh, who does not consider his 2013 title to be fully legitimate, since there wasn't an Aussie team there to challenge him at the time.
Right.
So this definitely will be an adjustment, since there hadn't been a record of that before.
Yeah.
Rusty, I know, has played in the maze, but not in a tournament, as far as
Right.
I know.
Okay. Yeah, I can feel Scythe on that one. I have a self-imposed asterisk next to our 2008 Ballarat win because Brisbane weren't there. So, well, at least
Hey, I mean,
Rusty
they were
wasn't there.
invited. They chose not to come. You can't control who's there and not there. You got to count those titles where you can.
Yeah, no, you're right. Damn it. um, well, I mean that should make this year pretty interesting then, because from what I've heard, the Detroit A team is actually pretty good.
Yes, I would agree. Looking at who's on it, so I can give you a quick rundown here.
Yeah.
Obviously, Scythe, Micro, Ghosty, Super Mario Brothers, that's one. Andy, ADHD, Disco Stew, and then Wolfman, I think, is getting brought in as a seventh player, as an alternate. So I'm
Right.
not 100% confirmed on that roster, but that's at least what I have in front of me based on what was the tournament page.
Right.
All very good players. Scythe and Micro, as three hits, are about as good as it gets in the U.S.,
Right.
so that's definitely going to be difficult to deal with. And just all those guys, they've played together constantly. They know that field. It would probably be even better if Baden were playing on that team instead of on Brisbane, but they can never get their act together and all get along together, so stuff happens.
I mean, the draw card of playing with your family is pretty high, so I can appreciate that. I know where his heart lies.
Yeah, fair enough.
So I haven't had the pleasure of playing with Micro or Ghosty before, but I hear those boys are pretty decent at the game. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see how they kind of do with, obviously, Scythe there. Scythe being the legend that he is. Do you know much about the other teams that are coming?
Based on the rosters that I can see, I do recognize at least some of the players from Detroit B that seem to be led by Jerbear, who is also a very good Detroit player,
Yeah.
and has played well in other fields. I know he was definitely one of the people who was on the East Coast hybrid team that came to San Marcos for West Coast 3, who ended up winning that tournament. We played against them in finals, so he's definitely a solid player. They have some other people I know have good tournament experience, so I think they'll definitely be in the mix as far as B teams go.
Yeah.
They're definitely not a far down the ladder kind of team. I would expect them to be competing for probably a top 4 spot.
Yeah. Okay. Which is pretty good for a home-based B team. I mean, obviously, if they can, I think their expectations will be higher than that. Because
Yeah, I think they
otherwise?
definitely want a gun for a top 2 or 3 spot.
Yeah.
But there are definitely some other tough teams in here.
Right.
Obviously, the next one down being Brisbane, who I think most people would probably consider to be the favorites because, hey, that's their track record. It's
Yeah.
what they do.
I mean, that team just on paper is pretty strong. Maybe not as strong as what they had last year, but it's a pretty good team.
No, but anytime you have Rusty, Tragedy, and Baden all on the same team, like, I'm pretty much just penciling that in for the grand final ahead of time.
Like Striker played awesome last year in Brisbane. And obviously Fredo is Fredo. Like, he's been around for ages, pretty solid ammo. Talks a bunch of shit, but that's why we love
Yeah,
him.
so we'll see what happens. Maybe he'll even come upstairs this year.
I doubt it. Too far.
Or he'll only be upstairs and won't go downstairs at all because it's kind of the inverse of our field.
And obviously, Elle sort of shores up the back. She's got a nationals under her belt and a couple of league seasons as well. So yeah, it looks like a pretty good team actually.
I think that's the ace up the sleeve of the other teams is they're just going to count on Stryker to take out his own teammate again, and maybe that will be Brisbane's Achilles heel.
Yeah. How close is Detroit Laserforce to the nearest hospital? Because yeah, there's concussions aplenty, I think.
Well, it can't be that far. They certainly are no strangers to injury in that field. I know Disco Stu did his knee pretty hard at one point.
Oof.
Baden's knees, I think, are held together with twine and duct tape or something at this point.
Oh, poor guy. He sneezes and has to go to the emergency room.
Yeah, you're one to talk, buddy.
Let's not go into that. Okay, so I mean, I guess we might as well talk about the rest of the teams, right? I don't know much about the Loveland teams coming. Obviously, met a couple of them in Sacramento, but yeah, have you played with any of those guys?
Well, it makes it a little bit more difficult to talk about them since they're constantly changing their names. So I'm not 100% sure who everybody is.
Man, I'm sure Russell fucking hates that. Goddamn stats.
Yeah, I'm sure pressing those 3 buttons to merge the accounts is definitely a real strain on his abilities there.
As long as he gets to say the word pasta, then I'm sure he'll be alright.
Pasta? What?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Stupid accent.
I assume, based on the roster, that Mischief, Bagel, and Slaughtermelon are Luke, Josiah, and Caleb, who are usually kind of the top 3 parts of their roster as they have been in previous years.
Yeah.
So they're definitely good players. I know just by reputation, Mimasaurus and Zenless play with those guys a lot, so I think they'll be a pretty solid team. I definitely am a little bit concerned about how we'll fare against Loveland because they're younger than us, number one. They play in their field more commonly. I think the Loveland field is going to translate to Detroit fairly effectively, so I think their style of play will work.
Yeah.
And they're going to have a lot more tournament experience under their belt by the time they show up. Obviously, Josiah played pretty well in Brisbane, was instrumental in getting his team into the playoff round of finals.
Yeah.
So as long as they can play together and get their stuff straight, I would expect them to be a serious team.
Yeah. Well, they've, everyone's a year older and hopefully a year more mature. Because we're talking about some young cats, so yeah, hopefully you're right. Hopefully they can kind of work together as a team and not lose their shit too hard.
Yeah. Loveland B I don't know as much about. Their captain supposedly is Sergeant Tucker, who I have played with on a few occasions. He's definitely a solid player.
Yeah.
The rumor is that A Kodama is going to play with them as well as a Merc, since he's going to be representing Chula Vista solo.
Yeah.
At that point. So I think that'll obviously improve their team. I don't know a lot about their other players, so they'll be in the mix. I'll be curious to see how they do.
Right. Just as a side note, isn't Chula Vista closed for sure now?
Yeah. So unfortunately, California sites have now dwindled down to next to nothing. We at one point had 4 functional Laserforce sites that were or at least kind of part of the tournament team. I guess we can't really count Santa Rosa. But we had Sacramento, San Marcos, and Chula Vista, and it's now just down to San Marcos, who doesn't send players to tournaments anymore. So things are looking a little grim for the California laser tag scene.
It's unfortunate. Well, maybe we'll delve deeper into that later on when we talk about Sacramento. But I guess the next team up is the Syracuse site, which has a bunch of names that I recognize in there.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So Beans and Sanch back in the mix, as per usual. There were rumors about Fox and Wookie coming, but I guess Fox has decided that he is retiring for the 19th time in his career. Wookie may or may not be a Merc. I'm not entirely sure what's going on there.
Yeah.
But they have some other good players. Scooney Bob Johnson. That name just makes me laugh every time. Um, Black Hammer, Princess, and Evil, and they were all good, experienced tournament players.
Yeah.
So I would also expect them, and because they probably play in the Detroit Maze almost as much as Detroit players. So I know historically, at least Beans has said that he's had difficulty in that field, but I think they'll still be pretty good.
Right. I noticed that Lenny's not on that team. Have you heard anything about him or?
It doesn't look like it. That also kind of surprised me a little bit. Unless he changed his name to Scooney Bob Johnson, and I'm just unaware. But I think he's still Do Not Pass Go.
I hope that's the case. Does he? I assume he still plays.
At least on and off. I know he was away at university for a little while, so I don't know if he's just kind of moved on as doing other things, if he has work commitments or something else that are getting involved. And you'd have to ask Beans.
Right. Okay, well, so I guess that leads us to your neck of the woods.
Yep. But we still got St. George, too, which they're bringing a lot of their usual contingent of guys. Thunder, Tandor, Ace Knight, Off the Wall, Crypt. So people who have a lot of tournament experience, who have played with each other a ton, I'd expect them to be pretty good. Even though, much like the SAC players, they're also getting a little long in the tooth, I guess. Most of them are now or have settled down and become proper adults with families of their own and things like that. So I'm sure this will be a good chance for them to get away for the week and be like kids again.
Yeah, there's no way to beat the wall that is Thunder. So,
this will lend itself well to that kind of style of play. If he's playing heavy, I definitely would count on that being a major obstacle to people trying to get into that resupply.
That dude's a beast, man. He's so good. He's an immovable object in Laserforce. It's crazy.
And he definitely has a switch too. I've seen him play really well in some tournaments, and on occasion, like the first day or two of the tournament, I've sometimes wondered, oh, okay, has Brandon maybe lost a step? Is he not as into it? And then by day 3, he's just smashing people to pieces. And I said, oh, no, wait, that guy is really, really good.
Yeah. It's interesting because he seems to do it like quite effortlessly until you actually talk to him, and then he always seems like just exhausted. So I'm sure he'll have a good tournament if the age doesn't catch up with him. Right. So Sacramento.
Yeah, now we're on to the trash tier teams.
The old self-deprecation.
Yep. So we're putting together at least part of our old kind of contingent for A team. Myself, Dude Broman Esquire, and Maniac going to be hooking back up from 2017, and they're of course reuniting from their effort on USA from last year as well. So always solid resupply pair.
Absolutely.
And then we're bringing in some newcomers. We got Disco Monkey, who was playing really well before our site unfortunately went sideways.
Yeah.
We have Odin's Fist, who also filled in on USA last year. I think that was a big learning experience for him. He was obviously one of our better members over the last few months. And bringing in the now very zen Nimitz is also going to be filling out the role after he was super chill in Brisbane, maybe a little bit unlike how he was in SAC 2017.
He's putting a whole new spin on going full Nimitz. It's a lot less
Yes,
dramatic.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Now that just involves losing the key to the caravan park.
Yeah, just casually lose the key and cost yourself however many dollars that ended up being. So that's a pretty good team.
Yeah, I think I'm fairly optimistic with that team. Obviously, our biggest hurdle will just be lack of practice time.
Yeah.
And things like that. But in terms of just raw ability, at least we've injected some youth back into the team with Odin and Nimitz to go along with the rest of us old men. So we'll see what happens.
So have you guys got any plans on doing a field trip anywhere before Nationals or?
Yeah, so we had it all booked, and this is why I was so sad to hear that you weren't coming. We have the idea of going down to Cedar Point, which is one of the big roller coaster amusement parks in the U.S.
Yeah.
They have some of the tallest and fastest coasters anywhere, I think, in this hemisphere,
Yeah.
Western Hemisphere, Northern Hemisphere, I don't know, whatever hemisphere we're in at this point. So really looking forward to that. At least confirmed going to that are me, Stalker, Bronwyn, Beans is going to go, and I'm hoping we'll get some of the Detroit players to come down, maybe get your guys, some of the Kiwis, to come down. I know they expressed some interest if they're going to be in town.
Yeah, for sure.
So we're planning to do that the Friday before Nationals, so that maybe before some people get in, but at least that way we're going on a weekday, not a weekend, so hopefully the crowds won't be as bad, and then it still leaves us the whole weekend to mess around in Detroit, get in practice games, settle in, all that kind of stuff.
Right. See the point, kids. Go get some roller coasters in you.
Yeah.
All right, so the SAC B team has some nationals experience in there.
I think everybody on there has played at least one Nats. Oh, maybe Manette hasn't played in Nats, but she has played tournaments.
Right.
So they have W, Manette, Stalker, Bronwyn, Autumn, and Starkiller are rounding out that squad.
Yeah.
So definitely people with tournament experience. I think they have some high hopes. I'm not entirely sure what their positional roster is going to look like, but that might actually be a kind of strength of that team, is that a lot of them are pretty switchable. They could run probably a variety of different lineups and just throw the rest of us for some confusion.
Yeah, for sure. And it also gives them the opportunity to kind of toy with it, day one and possibly day two as well, to shore up a lineup or a couple of lineups that kind of work against different opponents.
Yeah, I think so.
So that, I guess, leaves the Mercs, and like you say, there's a few in that list, and only a couple from Detroit. So I mean, it looks like a few people are planning on traveling for this tournament.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll definitely find places for everybody who wants to play. I imagine we'll get together a 10th team of Mercs one way or another by filling it out with other Detroit players who didn't get into one of the other teams or other traveling players. Since it looks like I think one or both of the Loveland teams are rostering 7 players, I don't know if there's going to be any discussion of maybe peeling off one of them if somebody's needed to kind of round out this 10th team.
Yeah.
But we have the personnel in there.
Yeah, I mean, if it's looking like, sort of 8 or 9 people as Mercs, I guess, if need be, you shift off one of your 7th off to that team. But I mean, you never know. They might prefer to play with a sub. I was actually talking to Al and Striker about it when I went over to Brisbane recently, and it was sort of brought up, why don't we play with a 7th? In other sports you have a bench player or a sub that can come in and play for someone who's not feeling so fresh. So might be a
well, with how often we get injured in these tournaments, maybe it's just good to have an injured reserve player.
That's exactly right. We were talking with one of our guys here about coming over with us last year as our 7th, and it would have been good to have him because Monkey Crape ended up blowing his hip out. So
yeah, I know that was a rough situation for you guys, and you made the best of it.
Yeah, apparently he was crippled for a few weeks after the tournament too. So
oh, I don't doubt it. Looking at how he was quote unquote walking.
Yeah, it's falling but catching yourself before you hit the ground, and you just do that over and over again, and somehow move in a forwards direction.
That's about how it looked.
So I mean, there's, like you said, there's a lot of teams coming. There's some good talent on those teams. Some fresh faces, which is also really good. It is shaping up to be like quite a good looking tournament. Yeah, I mean, it's almost enough to make a certain podcast host buy a plane ticket. We'll see.
There is still time, my friend.
Actually, to be fair, I am looking. I look every day, so we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. So depending what happens with that Merc team, I guess I might as well start getting myself into trouble now and making some at least temporary predictions here. just because of the nature of hybrid teams and things like that, I would think that probably that Merc team and then SAC B and Loveland B would probably be in kind of the mix for the bottom three spots, but I certainly wouldn't predict from there just because of the nature of how the competition goes.
Yeah.
I would probably pencil in Detroit A and Brisbane for the finals just based on track record and the overall skill level.
Yeah.
In between there, I am not going to hazard any kinds of predictions. I would love to say, yeah, we're going to be in the mix for third and maybe even second if we play well. But we haven't played in a while at this point, and just going for a run on the pavement last week, I think I also was catching myself from falling down, going up and down the stairs a few times. So I have a little work to do on myself too.
Are you guys going to try and play somewhere before the tournament?
That would certainly be nice. Yeah. I don't know how realistic that's going to be since the nearest sites are still a ways away.
Where is the nearest to you guys? Is that San Marcos or?
There are a couple of Laserforce sites, I think, in the Los Angeles area. So a little bit closer than San Marcos, but not really.
Right.
I think the closest ones. And then there are two in the Portland area in Oregon that are not connected to the tournament scene at all. I did visit one of those last time I was in Portland, since I usually make a yearly trip up there. So I'll have to check out the other one. Maybe if we go back before the tournament this summer, I can at least get a little bit of Laserforce time in, because I'd certainly miss it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we'll talk about this in another podcast, but like obviously you guys have been through a drought before, and I've experienced a shorter version of that, so I semi feel your pain.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not ready to give this game up yet, and having it forced upon you is unfortunate.
No, but I mean, I guess the only silver lining to that is that pretty much did kind of confirm there was going to be a second SAC team, because there was some talk about some people were, maybe I'm going to go, or maybe I'm going to go, but I don't really want to play.
Yeah.
But suddenly when you can't play anymore, I'm going to take a trip this summer, and I'm going to go play some damn laser tag.
Remember to support your local Laserforce kids, because, you don't know what you got till it's gone.
Do not take your Laserforce for granted.
Yeah, exactly.
So that goes out to all of you Detroit and Syracuse players who don't show up regularly to member nights and complain about drama. You don't know how good you have it, so behave.
I'm gonna shift some of that also to the Auckland scene as well. Come down and play some Laserforce.
You guys too.
Have some fun. Look, on that note, we might leave it there, but we'll pick this up again, and like I said, we're kind of hoping to be back on a weekly basis. Well, a weekly basis between now and nationals, and then if I end up coming to nationals, we'll run another daily podcast there, and if I don't, then obviously DK is there, and Fireball DK might get on the mic, so
he might make an appearance. There might be some interesting Instagram stories. You never know.
I mean, there always is, right? All right. Well, for this week, I've been Guy Next Door,
and I'm DK. See you next time.
Yeah. Always remember to backtrack, kids.